relationship she was to him, but Nguma was her name, and she passed the instructions down, and we have the Shangpa Kagyu through that lineage. So it is through the Mahamudra lineage, but not through the same vehicle from Tibet. So we have a number of sub-schools here, and we see them here in the different traditions here. So in the Karma Kagyu tradition, the way that the Mahamudra is packaged is into a package called the co-emergent union. So it's a way of packaging these Mahamudra instructions. Then we have the amulet box, which is the way that the Shangpa Kagyu package all the Mahamudra instructions. Then we have the 5 parts, which is the approach to Mahamudra in the Drikung Kagyu. Then we have the 6 cycles of equal taste through what's called the Drupka Kagyu, sub-school of Kagyu school. And then we have another system of practice called the 4 syllables. So this again is coming from Maitripa, who was sort of contemporary with Naropa. So he introduced this approach to practice called the 4 syllables. And then we have another system of practice similar called the pacifier, which I'm not sure still exists, but it came through great Indian master Padampa Sanghi, whose main teacher was Maitripa. And then we have another system of practice which is actually quite widely practiced, not only in Kagyu but also in the other Tibetan schools, the Gelug, Sakya and the Nyingma, and that's the Chur practice. And the Chur practice, sometimes translated the object to be cut off, so Chur literally means to cut, is through a great Tibetan yogini, Machik Labdron, whose main teacher was Padampa Sangye. So this Chur practice is very commonly practiced, I think, in all the 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism. And then we have a similar practice to Mahamudra, Dzogchen, in Sanskrit, Mahasandhi. And of course, this is sometimes called the Great Perfection in English. And this was the practice that was introduced to Tibet through great master, Indian master Padmasambhava. And this, of course, is the core practice of the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism. And then here he also talks about instructions on the Madhyamika view, and the Gelug, and so forth. So what we see here is at the sutra or Mahayana level of practice, we have lots of different approaches to practice. But then the Panchen Lama says, however, when investigated by a yogi, learned in definitive meaning scriptures, skilled in logical reasoning, and experienced in meditation, they all come down to the same intended meaning. Meaning that even though we have many systems of practice, which at the surface seem very different from each other, when we dig down and look at what is the core essence of these practices, they all come down to the same point. They're all coming down to realizing emptiness, realizing the empty nature of the mind. They all come down to the same point, the same meaning. Any questions about any of these systems of practice? Yeah.
What is a yogi?
A yogi is someone who does yoga. But generally, when we see the word yogi in Tibetan Buddhism, it's really referring to someone who is doing a lot of meditative practice, and generally it refers to someone who's particularly doing a lot of practice at the level of Tantra or Vajrayana. Any other questions?
So all those practices are actually a different name for Mahamudra? It's always Vishamata and Vipassana?
No. So the question was, all of these here are another name for Mahamudra, and the answer is no. The first 5, that is the co-emergent union, amulet box, 5 parts, 6 cycles of equal taste, maybe not the 4 syllables. Not sure about that one, but the other 4, probably the 4 syllables, yeah, I think the 4 syllables as well, these are all classified as Mahamudra because they're all coming from that oral lineage. They're just different ways of packaging the Mahamudra instructions. So then we have Dzogchen, which is very similar to Mahamudra. And then the pacifier, I think, doesn't exist anymore. And the Chur practice, of course, is not really exactly Mahamudra. It's practiced in, I think, all the traditions. And then instructions on Madhyamika view is just your classic instructions on emptiness, coming through Chandrakirti, Shantideva, and so forth. So what Panchen Lama is saying is that they seem to be all quite different systems of practice, but if we look very closely, they're all coming down to the same point of realizing emptiness. And most of them, of course, are doing that through investigating the mind. So certainly in Dzogchen and Mahamudra, when we do Vipassana practice, because we are investigating the mind. Whereas in the Geluk tradition, yes, we come to realize emptiness. Generally, we're mainly focusing, at least initially, more on the person, looking how does the person exist than the mind. But also in the Geluk, of course, we can turn our attention to observing the mind. How does the mind exist? How does the body exist? How do other phenomena exist? Okay. Then he says, this being the case, from among the two approaches within Sutra Mahamudra, one, seeking to meditate after having gained the correct view, and two, seeking the correct view after having meditated, here I shall explain in accordance with the latter approach. So, seeking to meditate after having gained the correct view, here we're talking about the two practices of shamatha and vipassana. So he's saying that there are two approaches to Sutra Mahamudra. In fact, there are two approaches to the Sutra level of practice in general, because the two main practices are shamatha and vipassana. We can first do shamatha, and then on that basis enter into vipassana, or we can do vipassana and then come to a view of emptiness, and then use emptiness as the object of shamatha practice. Either way, we're coming to unify the two. But he's saying here that we're following the approach of first doing shamatha, then vipassana. And so he says in his commentary here, now it is true that there are the two different approaches. However, the approach of seeking the correct view after having meditated, and after having meditated means after having practiced shamatha, is in accordance with that said by the protector Shantideva. So Shantideva, of course, great 8th century Indian master, who says, Vipassana endowed with shamatha completely destroys the afflictions. Knowing this, first seek shamatha. And he's also quoting the sutra here, which says, in the Pile of Jewels Sutra, through abiding in ethics, concentration is attained. Having attained concentration, cultivate wisdom. So here we see the three core areas of practice of ethics, concentration, wisdom. Concentration, again, here we're using the word shamatha. Shamatha is a particular level of concentration. So in general, the word concentration is coming from the Sanskrit word samadhi. And in the spiritual path, there are many levels of concentration we can develop. The one that we are focusing on here, and the one that's normally emphasized, particularly in the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, is shamatha. Shamatha is a Sanskrit word, of course. We can divide that into two. Shama means non-discursive or calm, a mind that is calm. Ta means to remain or abide. So we're talking about a mind that is not only calm, but a mind that is abiding single-pointedly on an object. So shamatha is often translated into English as calm abiding. In Tibetan it's shinne. And literal translation, shi is calm, ne means to abide. So this is the level of concentration that we are mainly focusing on here in Mahamudra, but also in Mahayana in general. In the Theravada traditions, when they talk about concentration practice, samadhi practice, you won't often see this word shamatha. Rather, you'll see a word jhana. That's another level of concentration. In fact, a higher level of concentration than shamatha. And here there are 4 levels of jhana. So we talk about first, second, third, fourth jhana. And then above this, there are another 4 levels called samapati. And this is often translated into English as something like absorption. So there are 4 levels of samapati. At the time of the Buddha, there were, of course, traditions that were talking about some sort of liberation from mental afflictions and suffering, but many of these traditions felt that the way to liberation was develop higher levels of concentration. Because the higher the level of concentration, the more that the mental afflictions are subdued. But concentration doesn't get rid of mental afflictions, it just keeps them dormant. But they didn't realise that, so they felt that if we keep going higher and higher in concentration, we'll achieve liberation. And so this is what Prince Siddhartha did when he left the palace. He had some teachers who taught him this. And so he went right up here to the top level and saw that he was still stuck in samsara. So he abandoned his teachers and went out on his own. And what he realised was that concentration practice on its own is not enough. We need to enter into vipassana practice. We need to realise the nature of reality. So then he went to vipassana practice and realised emptiness. For here in text it says that first practice shamatha, on that basis practice vipassana. So any one of these 5 levels here is very good for vipassana. These 4 levels, the mind is too withdrawn, too absorbed to use that to investigate nature of reality. So they wouldn't be a very good basis for the vipassana practice. But any one of those 5 levels is optimal. So here, that's what he's saying, is that to really be able to realise emptiness, we need a very calm, clear mind. We need at least the mind of shamatha if we want a direct realisation of emptiness. So here he says then, this being the case, what is the method for initially cultivating shamatha? So now we're going to look at the shamatha practice. Any questions first about any of this? Yeah.
When you say that mind is too absorbed in the samadhi, does it mean that all the 6 senses are absorbed?
Yeah. So here, in these levels of jhana, when we get to the 4th jhana, it's said that we stop breathing because we don't need to breathe anymore. So we can sit in the 4th jhana for weeks without breathing, no problem. But then here, when when the early meditators felt that this was the way to liberation, they felt that even in the 4th jhana, this idea of discriminating subtle form was coarse. So they went beyond that. So the first samadhi is what's called infinite space. So the meditator perceives everything as space in the first of these 4 levels. And then the meditator felt, well, that's still too coarse. So then they saw everything as consciousness, pure consciousness. And then they felt that's still too coarse. And then the next level is they they went to what's called nothingness. And then even to the top, what's called the peak of cyclic existence, where there's really a cessation of discrimination. But so that's not going to be helpful for investigating emptiness. So, what was the question again?
I mean, if those senses are gone.
Right. Yeah. So that happens way back. I mean, even if you're in the shamatha state, your sense faculties have already shut down well before shamatha. So in your chart here, which hopefully we'll have a bit of time to look at tomorrow, this shamatha chart, it describes the 9 stages to shamatha. So I think even before we get to shamatha, you'll find that the sense faculties will start to shut down while you're in meditation, of course, not when you're out of meditation. But so yeah, because of the increased focus on the mind, the sense faculties will go dormant.
It says, and I'm asking why through abiding in ethics, concentration is attained.
Right. So why through abiding ethics, concentration is attained? Of course, it's not saying that if we're ethical, suddenly, boom, we'll get shamatha. But what it's saying is that ethics is the basis for concentration practice. So if we're being unethical, we're going to have a lot of agitation in the mind. That's not going to be a very good basis to engage in shamatha practice if we're having a lot of unethical behaviour. It's not going to provide a suitable basis for concentration. And then, of course, through concentration, wisdom is attained. It's not saying if we achieve shamatha, we'll realise emptiness. But what it's saying is that if we want to realise emptiness, we need a calm, clear, focused mind. So each one is the basis of the next. Okay. So if we go into the text now, back to the text, it says, shamatha, it says, regarding this, there are 2 outlines, preparation and actual practice. So here, preparation there's 2 parts to preparation. Preparation means here how to prepare ourselves for shamatha meditation, and then how to prepare ourselves at the beginning of each shamatha meditation. So we're going to now look at the first one, how to prepare ourselves for shamatha practice in general, meaning how to set up our life in such a way to provide conducive conditions for shamatha practice. And so here, in the meditation texts, they often talk about the 6 preconditions or the 6 prerequisites. The first of those is the outer conditions, and that is being described here from this first verse by Maitreya, who says, the place where the intelligent practice is a place with easy access, a safe place, a place with good ground and good friends, and the requisites for yogic practice. So this is talking about a supportive environment. So generally here in the text, it gives this list of these 5 things that we see here mentioned in the text. The first, it says, a place where the intelligent practice is a place with easy access. Easy access here means easy access to the necessities such as food and water and so forth. So these conditions are describing conditions if we want to engage in some longer-term shamatha practice in terms of retreat. We really want to put a lot of time and energy into shamatha practice, but I think we can apply the 6 preconditions to how to set up our life in such a way to support any sort of meaningful life, to practice in general. So here, the supportive environment, the first one is easy access, means easy access to food, clothing, water, and so forth. The second one is a safe place. Remember, these texts were written maybe 1,000 years ago or more, and sometimes they tended to meditate in forests and stuff. And so sometimes in the meditation text here, when it talks about safe place, it says, make sure it's a place with no lions or tigers. They might eat you. And then a place with good ground is talking about a healthy place, a place that's not full of disease and so forth. And then good friends here is a place where we have a few like-minded people to help support us. So, of course, if we're doing a meditation retreat, we need a little bit of support for us. But in general, I think in daily life, if we want to have some sort of meaningful life, particularly if we want to meditate and move in a new direction in our life, then this idea here brings up this idea of Sangha that I briefly mentioned earlier. The idea of spiritual community is that if we really want to do something in our life, change our life, I think this is very, very important. You know, if we have this idea that, you know, I'm an independent sort of person, I can do this on my own, I think you're going to find it extremely difficult, if not impossible. And I know from my own experience and talking to many people, you know, when I first came into contact with Buddhism and did a couple of courses and so forth, I was very enthusiastic and really wanted to change my life. And I did these courses in Nepal and India. So then after that, I went back home to Australia, full of enthusiasm, meditate every day, change my life, I'll do it. But unfortunately, where I went back to, there was no Buddhist centre. None of my friends or anyone I knew was interested in doing any of this, so I was on my own. And basically, for 2 years, nothing happened. Nothing happened. No matter how much I wanted to meditate or change my life, I just got swept up in my old habits. And I found it almost impossible to change those habits on my own. So I think we need to really pay attention to this and find these like-minded people, this Sangha. And the Sangha, of course, can come in a more organised form in terms of like a Buddhist centre, or it can be in a more informal sense in just finding a few like-minded people and getting together. So find that Sangha, get together, meet regularly, maybe discuss a few things, meditate a bit together, support other people, get some support from them, and I think you'll find it's going to be a lot easier. If you try and do it on your own, it's like you're sort of swimming against the tide, the current. You know, everyone's going that way, you're trying to go this way, and it's just too difficult. So find that Sangha, and you'll find it's going to be a lot easier. So that's good friends. The fifth point here is it says the requisites for yogic practice. So yogic practice here, we're talking really about just meditation and a contemplative lifestyle. Then the requisites for that, often in the text mentioned here, is find a place that's quiet and not a lot of people around. Because of course if you're doing a meditation retreat, you don't want too much activity, too much noise. So that's the outer conditions, the supportive environment. And then the 5 other things, some of those are mentioned in the next sentence, are what's called the inner conditions. So here in the next sentence it says, it is explained that while remaining in such a place, it is necessary to rely on the prerequisites for shamatha by abiding in pure ethics, having few desires, being content, and so forth. And then it says, and it is definitely necessary to do the 6 preparatory practices. So the 6 preparatory practices are what to do at the beginning of each meditation session, and we'll look at that tomorrow morning, and that's described in the next paragraph. So what are these other 5 preconditions or prerequisites? A few of them are mentioned here. The first 2 are having few desires and being content. And this is to do with material things. Money, wealth, stuff, material stuff. So of course, if we're putting all of our time and energy in earning more money, getting more stuff, a bigger house, a bigger car, more and more stuff, then of course we're not going to have much time and energy for meditation and developing ourselves. So few desires is with respect to things that we don't have, and being content is with respect to things we do have. So if we can really work on this, then we're not going to spend all of our time and energy trying to get more stuff, more wealth, more possessions. And then the next one also sort of is related to this is few activities, meaning we need to simplify our life. And as I mentioned already, in the context of these preliminaries, that we often, in our modern world particularly, we have very busy lives. And our days are full of activities. And some of those are essential. Again, most of us probably need to work at some level. Some have family responsibilities, other responsibilities. But again, we tend to fill up our day with lots of other activities. But do they really bring us much, a lot of these other activities? Often if we look closely, we'll see they don't really bring us much. So of course what we can do is simply try and forcibly cut these things out of our life, but I think it's always going to be a struggle if we do that. Rather, what's the best thing to do is exactly those preliminaries, particularly the first two, precious human life and death. If we really reflect on those and internalize those, we're going to see that a lot of these extra things we fill up our day with are not really bringing us anything, and we're going to lose interest in them because we'll see they're no use to us. They're not helping us at all. And thereby we'll lose interest in them, and then we'll have time and energy and space to meditate and develop ourselves as a person. So therefore, if you come up with this excuse, I'd like to meditate but I don't have time, then I would suggest we need to reflect on precious human life and death. Because it's simply a matter of priorities. We're just prioritizing other things. So we need to really have a look at our life, what's important in our life. And I think if you really appreciate this precious human life we have, full of opportunity, it's not going to last forever, then I think we'll want to really make our life meaningful, and we'll lose interest in a lot of these extra things we fill up our day with. And then we can have few activities and simplify our life. And then the fifth point is ethical lifestyle. So again, in all Buddhist traditions, the foundation is ethics, and I think that's the foundation of any sort of meaningful lifestyle. And then the sixth point is to eliminate compulsive thinking. And I think we all tend to have some obsessive compulsive thinking about certain things. And of course, while we're caught up in a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking, that's not really going to be very good for meditation practice. And again, I think what's very helpful here is particularly this fourth of the preliminaries, the common one, the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. That a lot of our obsessive compulsive thinking is based on the worldview that the source of my happiness and the source of my suffering is out there. And then we obsess about trying to get these things and trying to avoid those things, and we're constantly thinking about how we can get those things and avoid those things. And so and it's all about in the future as well, mainly. So I think one way to really reduce that obsessive compulsive thinking is to work on that preliminary and really shift our worldview, and instead of thinking pleasure equals happiness, to really have this worldview of this genuine happiness, inner well-being, and shift our attention from out there to in here. that here is the real source of my suffering, the real source of my happiness. And if we can shift that worldview, I think a lot of our obsessive compulsive thinking will just vaporize, because a lot of it is about trying to get the wondering how